She wiped the dust off the Apache's machine gun, like she had done 100 times before, her movements calm and steady. Morning light spilled across the army hangar, catching the tiny patches on her uniform sleeve. Most people never looked twice at them, just simple symbols stitched onto worn fabric. But today, something felt different. Maybe it was the silence in the air, or the way her hands trembled just slightly as she worked. The pilot walked in, helmet under his arm, ready for another routine check. He had seen dozens of crew members clean his helicopter, but the moment his eyes landed on her, he stopped mid. His face changed, the casual confidence draining away in an instant. It wasn't her rank or her expression that froze him, it was the patch on her sleeve. He recognized it immediately, though he hadn't seen one in years. A symbol connected to a mission no one talked about, a group that disappeared quietly, and a promise he thought he'd left far behind. She felt his stare and looked up, confused at first, then guarded, as if she already knew this moment was coming. The hangar suddenly felt smaller, the quiet heavier. She opened her mouth to speak, but he stepped closer, his voice low and tight. "Where did you get that patch?" Her answer was simple, but it hit him harder than the desert wind ever could, and just as he realized who she really was, the alarms across the base started to scream. He stared at her for a long moment. The hangars hummed suddenly, feeling like static in his ears. That patch wasn't just a symbol, it was a reminder of a mission that had gone wrong, one that had been erased from every record. Few people even knew it had existed, and even fewer survived. Her presence here, in this familiar base, shouldn't have been possible. She kept her hands on the gun, but her eyes didn't leave his. There was a calmness there that didn't match the tension in the room, a quiet confidence that unsettled him. "I didn't think anyone from that," he hesitated. "Team would still be around," he finally said, voice low, almost trembling. Her lips curved into a faint, knowing smile. "Most aren't," she replied, her tone steady, but her eyes held stories he wasn't ready to hear. She didn't explain how she had ended up here, or why she had joined this new crew under a different name, but the patch spoke volumes. It was a declaration, a warning, and a question all at once. The alarms continued to blare, but now he barely noticed. Memories of past missions, lost teammates, and impossible escapes flashed in his mind. She moved closer to the helicopter, adjusting the machine gun with practiced ease. As if daring him to speak, he swallowed hard. He had trained for emergencies, for attacks, for chaos, but nothing could have prepared him for this. For the woman who had been part of a story he thought was over, walking calmly into his world again, and in that moment, he realized that whatever was about to happen next would change everything again. He couldn't take his eyes off her, and neither could the rest of the crew, who had begun to gather at the edges of the hangar. Whispers ran through the group, some curious, some cautious, but everyone felt the tension rising like static electricity. No one dared approach. The pilot knew this wasn't just about a patch or a past mission. It was about choices, secrets, and the consequences that came with them. She finished inspecting the machine gun and stepped back. Her posture relaxed but alert. He noticed the subtle scars on her hands and wrists, evidence of battles and escapes no one had ever documented. She had survived things he had only read about in classified files. A small knot of admiration tangled with unease in his chest. Who was she really, and why had she returned now? Suddenly, a faint vibration ran through the floor. The alarm blared louder, and his comm system crackled with scrambled messages. Another base alert, another potential threat, but this time, it felt personal. She didn't flinch. If anything, her calmness grew, as though she had expected it. The pilot remembered the mission, the one erased from history. They had lost men, equipment, and answers. And now, standing in front of him, was someone who carried every secret he thought was buried. He wondered if she had been sent to warn him, or test him. As the tension mounted, he realized he was facing more than a professional dilemma. This was a collision of past and present, trust and suspicion, loyalty and survival. And with every second that passed, the hangar seemed to close in, holding its breath for the storm that was about to break. No one spoke, but the unspoken question hung in the air. What did she want, and could anyone survive finding out? The hangar seemed to shrink around them, the alarms a constant reminder that something was coming, something no one could predict. The pilot's heart pounded in his chest as he watched her move with precise, almost predatory calm. Every motion she made carried history, experience, and danger. He knew she wasn't just another crew member, she was a ghost from a mission he had tried to forget. His comm crackled again, this time with an urgent warning about unidentified activity near the base perimeter. The words barely registered. His eyes were locked on her, on the patch, on the quiet confidence that made his blood run cold. Could she be here to help, or to punish? Every instinct screamed that the past had come alive, and he was standing in its path. She suddenly stopped near the helicopter, her fingers resting lightly on the gun's trigger. He noticed the way her eyes darted toward the hangar entrance, calculating, anticipating. The crew behind him shifted uneasily, sensing the tension but not understanding its depth. Every second stretched, the air thick with suspense. The pilot swallowed hard, forcing himself to speak, but the words caught in his throat. Before he could ask anything more, a shadow flickered across the hangar door. The alarm shifted, a deeper, more urgent tone echoing. as if warning them all that the real danger had arrived. She turned toward him, her expression unreadable, and for a moment, he thought he saw recognition, relief, fear, and something darker flash across her face. Then the hangar doors shook violently, and a cold realization hit him. This wasn't about old missions or patches anymore. Whatever was coming, it was bigger, closer, and unstoppable. And just like that, the quiet tension exploded into chaos, leaving him and everyone inside on the edge of everything they thought they knew. The hangar doors slammed open, letting in a gust of cold wind that rattled the equipment and sent loose papers flying. The pilot instinctively reached for the controls of the Apache, but his hands froze when he saw the figures approaching, uniformed, precise, but not part of any base roster he recognized. Their patches were different, darker, unfamiliar, and their movements were almost too coordinated, too deliberate. She didn't flinch. In fact, her calmness sharpened into something almost predatory. The pilot realized, with a jolt, that she had anticipated this. Every subtle glance, every measured step she had taken earlier was leading up to this exact moment. But why, and for whom? His mind raced. Was she here to protect them, or was she part of this unknown threat? A sudden burst of static over the comm interrupted his thoughts. Abort. Base compromised. Repeat. Base compromised. The message was fragmented, panicked, but clear enough to raise the stakes. The threat wasn't just external. Someone inside the base had tipped them off. The pilot's pulse quickened. He glanced at her, searching for answers in her steady gaze. But all he saw was determination, mixed with a hint of regret. Then she moved toward the approaching team. And for the first time, he heard her voice, low and commanding. "You shouldn't have come here," she said. The words carried weight: warnings, secrets, and consequences. The approaching figures paused, as if recognizing the authority behind her name. But the tension didn't ease. The pilot realized that nothing in his training could prepare him for this. The past had collided with the present in a way he couldn't predict, and the secrets she carried were more dangerous than the threats outside the hangar. Whatever was about to unfold would change everything, and no one was safe. The approaching team froze as she stepped forward, her voice slicing through the tension like steel. The pilot watched, heart racing, as she moved with the precision of someone who had survived missions most soldiers only read about. In seconds, she disarmed two of the intruders with swift, calculated movements, while the others hesitated, clearly unprepared for her skill. It was as if the past itself had returned to protect this base, and the pilot realized he had underestimated her entirely. He jumped into action, taking control of the Apache, preparing to cover her. The alarms blared, lights flickered, and every second felt like an eternity. Yet she remained calm, almost untouchable. She finally glanced at him, her eyes holding a mix of urgency and reassurance. "We can stop this," she said, "but only together." In a blur, the remaining intruders were incapacitated, retreating toward the hangar doors. The pilot and the crew breathed a collective sigh of relief, thinking the worst was over. But then she froze, her gaze fixed on one figure standing slightly apart from the rest, someone he recognized, someone who shouldn't have been alive, the commander they thought had vanished years ago. The intruder smiled faintly, holding up a hand. "Impressive," he said, "but the game isn't over." In that instant, the pilot understood the truth. The mission she had survived, the patch she wore, and the secrets she carried weren't just remnants of the past. They were the key to a far larger conflict that had only just begun. She turned to him, a shadow of uncertainty crossing her face. "We're not done yet," she